In 2014, Simone Schmidt started going to the Ontario archives to look at the original case files of the Rockwood Asylum for the Criminally Insane. The result is an album of songs written from the perspective of women incarcerated there between 1856 and 1877.
I usually go on Wednesdays because the archives are open from 12 to 8, so I can miss rush hour. It takes me an hour to get here.
Schmidt's research was not without hindrance. While medical records 100 years and older are open to the public, the material of interest was stored with some files much younger, protected by privacy law. As a result, Schmidt was required to submit a special request for access, which took several months to process.
In the meantime, I just went through all these microfiches of the superintendent's diaries, ledgers, and filled myself in on the historical context in which these women were living prior to being incarcerated.
The case files are brittle. They're old and they're sparse. They're written by the medical superintendent. The associated court documents are written by police and by judges, who for the most part are British men. Ultimately, what the archive paints is a portrait of power, the medical and legal arms of the settler colonial apparatus. After reading what is said of those incarcerated, for Schmidt, the question remains, what would they say for themselves?
I try to come here every 3 months minimum, and I look at the way the light hits in different seasons and the trees, and try to think about what kind of imagery might work itself into the metaphor or allusions in songs. Things like sumac or waves or a tree bending away from the building.
Rockwood stands on Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory on the north shore of Lake Ontario. It was built to house the criminally insane, people who had pled insanity at trial, and inmates who were declared insane in jail. Before Rockwood's establishment, in 1856, the criminally insane were shuffled between district jails, the Provincial Insane Asylum in Toronto, and the basement of the Kingston Penitentiary. They were so resistant to the social order of those institutions that the superintendent of the asylum at Toronto, Joseph Workman, referred to them as moral monsters. Schmidt has made several attempts to gain access to the limestone edifice, which was boarded up and closed in 1997.
I wrote to the government and didn't get a reply, and I also tried to bribe a security guard to no avail. And when I talked to a security guard about what it's like inside, she said they have to wear hazmat suits on account of the asbestos and animal foul that's all over the place. I offered to accompany her, and she declined.
With the help of the Kingston Historical Society, Schmidt was able to enter one of the first incarnations of the asylum, the former home of John Cartwright.
This whole 35 acres was owned by John Cartwright and was bought in 1856 by the Upper Canadian government with the purpose of building the Rockwood Asylum. Notice at the edge of the property, a street called Cartwright Street.
Over the 12 years it took penitentiary labourers to build the Rockwood Asylum, the criminally insane men were housed in the Cartwright Villa, while the women were made to live in the horses' stables, which have since been torn down.
But it might have been right here.
This is but the beginning of a history rife with administrative folly and medical violence. From Dr. Litchfield, the fraudulent medical superintendent, a great friend of John A. MacDonald, to sedation, bloodletting, leeching, restraint, and moral therapy. The contemporary injustices of Canadian carceral and medical institutions can easily be traced back.
Looking at the history of Rockwood, I see the context in which notions of criminality and insanity are being enshrined in settler colonial institutions that are foundational to the ones still standing today. The parallels are clear, mainly the people who don't integrate into the economy, the people who've been traumatized by migration, by the violence of settlerism, by border imperialism. People who don't share the dominant paradigm are warehoused for the profit of administrators.
Schmidt's album, Audible Songs from Rockwood relays the songs of 10 women whose lives were carved at by the settler colonial administration, and is accompanied by extensive liner notes detailing the social context in which they would have been written.
There are 10 acres, slopeside to the west, 2 thoroughbreds, a Rockwood red, and a barn filled with the rest. Run with the babbling brook, calling me every now. My father's words, a full 3/3 come to me on his leaving. Pile your silver up like dust, your clothing thick as clay. Sinner, hold your weight and go while the righteous work away. Pig to ham, corn to bread, leaf to smoke, and household fed. Of all the things I help along, the fire loves me best. I would do it all alone, but for the season's plight. So I keep a few on hand and do what is till it is night. Pile your silver up like dust, your clothing thick as clay. Sinner, hold your weight and go while the righteous work away.